Hey everybody, this is Dark Guardsman, and we're back with another video. Now, not much progress has been made since last time. I didn't actually get the radioactive blocks implemented. The plan is to still eventually get to them at some point, but what I did go ahead and do is work on the radioactive system for armor protection, and did a little bit of research and kind of worked around of how we're going to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something very similar to the Fallout games. We're going to use a radiation value, and we're going to store that on entities, items, blocks, so on, to express the amount of radiation that's absorbed, as after all, rads is absorbed amount of radiation. I did look into using some standardized units like grays and a few other things, but gray is a smaller unit value than rads, so I want to use a larger unit value. That way we get a little bit better precision storage on things. So we're going to use rads. Rads will be stored on just about everything. They're going to be stored in your items, they're going to be stored in the blocks, they're going to be stored in the player. The current version does it on entities only. That way I can just get a very simplistic implementation going so we can start tracking radioactive values and actually do things. With this, the armor actually does work, so as long as I have everything armor-wise on, it will actually block the radiation. As soon as I take an armor piece off, it'll slowly start to tick off radiation because you have to have all four pieces involved. This will slightly change in the future. The goal would be to distinguish between the types of radiation. So we'll have the armor protect you from actual neutrons and gamma rays and stuff like that. So when those hit you, the armor will protect you from that. And then we're going to have particleized radiation, so we'll have like air particles. So for those who've never actually looked into done research, you can actually go to places like Chernobyl right now and not actually die from radiation exposure. However, you do still need to wear a respirator because there's still particles of that radiation that float through the air, and you can inhale them, and the particles sitting in your lung will slowly decay over time, causing radiation damage to your body. But if you get it on your skin or something, it just washes off and you're perfectly fine. Well, to some extent. You still probably should wear protective clothing and everything else, like a very simple suit, but you don't need heavy radiation shielding. So we'll probably do in the future, we'll have several different effect sources, and we'll have that particle system. So you'll have blocks give off particles that with the radiation, and you'll have entities and items give off particles, and that's how they'll handle decay. So with the radiation value, you accumulate radiation, but you're going to decay that radiation back off. After all, I don't want you just to be accumulating radiation to be stuck with that value. There has to be some kind of mechanic to get rid of it. So right now, how that mechanic's going to work is you'll just, over a period of several in-game days, the value will just go down to 0, as long as you get to a reasonable level. If you start hitting acute levels, so how we're going to do it is when you hit 200 rads, you're going to start actually taking some negative effects. 400 rads, you're going to start taking damage. 1,000 rads, you're dead. Just flat out, your character's going to die once you hit 1,000 rads. There will be no way to really protect against this, because physically 1,000 rads, your body's just going into full system organ shutdown, and you're just going to kill over it, etc., etc. We won't simulate everything for that, so what we'll actually end up doing is just do some basic stuff. I'm going to implement a very basic numeric system. Not a lot of potion effects are going to happen. I might apply some potion effects like nausea every so often, so it's not going to be a continuous effect. It'll just be like your character's walking and then it'll be an RNG value and your character will just vomit or something. So that'll be implemented on there. Of course, when we do the particles and everything else, you'll be able to do things like have respirators. I do plan to do air tank systems. So the current armor, if anybody's ever actually paid attention to it, has an air tank on the back here. So there's going to be a model of an air tank on here with a valve and everything else, and there will be an O2 system that you actually do. So if you're using O2, you have 0 chance of inhaling particles, but you do have a limited air supply. If you're using a respirator, it'll take out like a large percentage of the particles out of the air. We'll also use that respirator for other things too, so we'll have like chemical stuff that'll leak from your... So say for example, one of your chemical extractors exploded, and you just put chemicals all over your base, you would then have a needed respirator to protect yourself from that. There'll be different various things. Of course, this will also leak over into other mods. We'll probably do other chemical effects with other mods and everything else. So that's what, just want to show that off. I can actually show the system working, so let me go ahead and talk about the code. Right now we only have a radiation effect registered. The effect just accumulates radiation on your character. It does have a min-max and a config, so if you set the min-max, I will have configs to set the different radiation levels. There will be events triggered for this as well, so say for example you made a mod that added, say, like a different character body the player could play, and you didn't want that character body to accumulate radiation as quickly, or you want to have a different max level, or you want to make a robot that doesn't take radiation. Keep in mind, if you do make a robot, electronics do actually take damage from radiation. Most equipment is rated for very high radiation levels, and it usually takes somewhere around a couple thousand rads to start damaging electronics. We actually will be simulating those effects in this game. So if you end up, say, coming into an area with like a consumer grade electronic, you may start seeing it act up when you're in a radiation zone. For those who want to see this actually work, you can go YouTube this and Google this, and you will find videos of people exposing electronics to radiation just to see what happens. There's actually a guy's YouTube channel that he's got some really cool videos where he shoots neutrons directly into things like IP pods, MP3 players, cell phones, and you see the electronics slowly get destroyed over time. But we do actually track what time when radiation is added to you. This will play into a system where I'll try to limit how much radiation you actually are absorbing per second, because you do have a surface area, and that surface area can only take off so much radiation at a time. As I do more research, I'll figure this out. Of course, we're also going to track when radiation was removed from you. This is going to come into play. We're going to remove probably a couple values of radiation every 10 minutes is how it's probably going to work. Of course, this will be configurable. You'll be able to adjust this. It'll be event driven, so you can do everything else. There will be interaction events. There will also be with the Unity update events. If your character is radioactive and another character gets near you, they will start to absorb a certain amount of radiation. Of course, that will also be config driven and everything else. But anyways, let me go ahead and put a break line here, and we're going to actually test this. So right now, I do have a piece of radioactive item. I've had it in my inventory this entire time. This works for all the radioactive items. I did actually go through and fix the fizzle fuel. It's not radioactive. The breeder cell is not radioactive. Both of these are radioactive, and yellow kick is radioactive. With all these items, by the way, they're going to have different radioactive values. It's very likely I may actually even go through the process of making sure the fuel rods have much significantly lower radioactive values, simply because they're actually in a shielded container. So we might play with that with them. I am not going to probably make these two have radioactive values, simply because I don't think strange matter gives off any type of particle. I think antimatter does a little bit, but both of them are probably negligible. So these are going to have different radioactive values. But anyways, so I've got it in my inventory. I've got a full set of armor on. And as soon as I remove one piece, you see it immediately triggers the code, and it will hit this. How this currently works is it is a random chance of if the item does particle decay. I am going to configure this. I'm going to do a lot of balancing checks with this. The ideal is, even if you have a full inventory full of radioactive items, I don't want you to be hit by a radiation every single tick per slot, because you would effectively kill over and die in the process. So we do have to make sure this is balanced to ensure that certain things happen and you take a certain maximum amount of radiation per tick. That way you're not getting killed by things. I also kind of want to make it somewhat realistic, and how it works realistically is that just every so often a particle or one of the atoms inside of radioactive material will just decay off. And what it means by decay, it'll go from being like uranium to like cerium and a few other atomic materials that are different types, and when it does that, it releases neutrons, and it releases other things that then when they hit your body destroy the cells in your body and then cause cancer, to cause different things. And of course your body can then also absorb the radioactive materials as well, which then will attach to things like carbon and everything else, actually causing harm to characters. So we got to balance that all out, make that all work and everything, and get that to a point where it's usable. But you can see it does actually work, and this will tick off continuously. What I can actually do to make this even more evident is we can go if target is instance of Unity player, and we can add a chat message. This is 1.7, because if people are looking at this and going, well, this is not how this looks in newer versions, that's because, well, it's a different version here. So we're going to do this, and gotta make this quick because both my brother and my dog are wanting my attention here. So we can do this, and I can get effect ID to say it's radiation, and then I can also show the power level of this, which is always going to be 1 because I've got it hard-coded to 1. But what I can also do is show you what your current radiation level is. So we can do a couple lines here, and then do rads, and we can watch our radiation value go up. And then as soon as that reloads, I can hit play, and what we can do is see in chat, we can see that my radiation level is going up. And you see it doesn't actually kick off every single tick. Although the reason why you're seeing two different numbers here is I think this is ticking off on both the client and server. I will have to fix it so it's only running server side. But you can see that this does not reduce the amount of radiation you're absorbing by having different parts on it. I may implement that as a separate feature, but right now it basically works as, if you don't have the full set on, you're basically taking equivalent to if you're not wearing any part of it. That'll of course probably be changed. But you put this back on, no radiation because you're getting fully protected. At the moment, damage on armor is not implemented. I will have to go through and work on this and actually implement this. I don't know if I'm actually going to use the metadata system for the actual damage like you would with a normal item. And the reasoning for this is in 1.13 this is gone. I do plan to update this mod to 1.12 as soon as I'm done with the 1.7 version. So there will be a need to get those changes rolled out and make sure that I don't have to recode a whole bunch of stuff. So what I may do is I may store the armor damage, and what I may actually do is instead of storing it as actual armor damage, I may store it as a radiation value on the armor. And the advantage of actually doing this with it is that I can make it where you can scrub your armor down and clean it and reuse it, and that way your damage to the actual armor is being tracked as a separate value as durability. Say for example, if I hit you with a sword, the armor takes a lot of damage, which by the way, I do plan to make these pretty weak in equivalent amount of damage you can take, so if you're running around and get hit by a zombie, this armor is going to get shredded. The reason for this is this armor, radioactive suits in real life are not very durable things. You basically have some layers of rubber, some lead plates, some different things like graphite and everything else in them, and they are not too hard to puncture through. So if you get hit by like a dagger, sword, bullets will go right through, for example. Very likely what I'll do is I'll probably put a whole bunch of code in the newer version. I won't do this for the 1.7 version because it's just too much time and effort it will take, but when we go to do the 1.12 version, I might spend a huge amount of time just keeping track of what damage you actually took. So if you take a slashing hit, you may see a gash forming your suit, and your pressure seal is gone, so all the air is going to leak out of your suit, and then you won't be getting radiation protection at all because you now have a big hole in your suit where all the radioactive particles can get through. So we'll probably do stuff like that. Of course, I will be making armored versions of these suits for different mods. It won't probably happen in Atomic Science. Atomic Science, I plan to keep it exactly what it is, which is a reactor mod with radiation and everything. So I won't be putting combat items in here at all, so you won't be seeing things like depleted uranium rounds, we won't be seeing things like combat armor. What you will see is you will see respirators, very basic chemical suits, very basic radioactive suits, maybe some more heavier, higher grade radioactive suits that fully protect you, some lower grade ones that don't fully protect you, ones with different things like scrubbers on them. May see powered versions that add magnetic fills to give you really high levels of protection from radiation and everything else. But I'm going to end this here, as I do have to go and actually do a few things, and I'll be back with more videos here later when we get more progress on the mod. And if you guys can as well, go ahead in the comments, kind of describe how you would like to see the system actually work. So after you've heard me talk about my plan, feel free to comment and tell me everything you want to see with the system. I'm fully open to anything and everything.